Okay, maybe that's a good transition point here into Morpho V2. And maybe if we could, break the architecture down into there's a markets level to it, and then there's a vault level. So we've got a V2 on the markets and a V2 on the vault. Whichever order you want to tackle those in, describe, I guess, some of the high level benefits of Morpho V2. And then if we could align those to, where does that belong in the markets and vault improvements?
Sure. So let's talk about V1 first. So the way Morpho V1 is organized is you have vaults for depositors that are curated by a curator. So you deposit your USDC in a vault, and then the curator of the vault is going to allocate it to immutable lending markets, right? And those markets in Morpho V1 are variable rate lending, whose rate is dictated by like an interest rate model, like a formula essentially. And those are crypto-backed loans, and a market could be like CBBTC to borrow USDC or STETH to borrow USDC. Those would be two lending markets. Lending markets. And then the curator would plug on top and aggregate those and distribute liquidity to each of those. Morpho V2 is a very similar structure where Vol V2 works exactly like Vol V1. The main difference, there are a couple differences, but the main difference is that those vaults are now able to allocate to Morpho V1, Morpho V2 markets, and maybe, if in the future V2 markets have improvements, or if there is a V3, I don't know, then will be also able to allocate into those, right? There are a couple of nice features on Vol V2 that we're introducing, like, on rules and caps, but whatever, it's not so important. So Vol V2, same as Vol V1, except now those are general aggregators. They can aggregate market V1, market V2, and potentially V3. Now, what are market V2? Well, market V2 is essentially, at the high level, you could think of it as a lending order book, right? I don't think that's the right way to think about it a bit more precisely. It's essentially a protocol that allows you to trade zero coupon bonds for over collateralized lending, right? And so in practice, this is intent-based as opposed to pool-based. What do we mean by this? In Morpho V1, you have to allocate liquidity in the pool and wait for borrowers. And that's the case for all DeFi, frankly, except for a few intent-based protocols like Uniswap and others on the taking side of things. But until today, it was you deposit your liquidity in a pool that allows specific borrowers to come in. Do they have like the Bitcoin collateral with the right threshold? In Morpho V2, you promise your liquidity and you make an offer off-chain that you sign, and you say, hey, I have 1 million in my vault, and I'd be fine lending it to this opportunity, to this collateral, but also maybe to this collateral. And you can make a very long list, right? So the unicity of Morpho V2's design is that liquidity can be promised at multiple risk profiles at the same time, at multiple chains at the same time, at multiple compliances at the same time. I'll give you an example. You have liquidity on Ethereum. You could say, hey, I'm happy to settle on Base, but also I'm happy to settle on Arbitrum, right? Here's my liquidity. Whenever you take my offer, we'll bridge the liquidity just in time with the bridge that I specified, and you'll be able to take a loan there. You have the same parallel with compliance and the same parallel with risk. So anyway, and so the way Morpho V2 markets are structured is a bonds trading protocol that is intent based as opposed to pool based.
Awesome. All right, I've got a lot of follow-up questions here. Why? So there's a couple of different designs you could have looked at, I guess. There's like the intent sort of RFQ-based system. There literally are approaches, in my understanding, like a limit order book built on maybe like a Uni V4 hook or something like that. And then there's also auctions-based. So can you kind of walk through what are the trade-offs of each of these approaches?
Right. I think for us, the most important challenge you have in lending, especially if you are going the path of Morpho, which is a free market driven approach, is fragmentation, right? Like in Morpho V1, we have a lot of different markets, right? And vault managers allocate to a specific market. But then the problem they have is like, okay, what if the borrowers is going to come from another market, right? And so we have this concept called the public allocator that allows you to promise liquidity on multiple markets at the same time, But the problem is that the rate is variable, right? So if you move liquidity around, it could spike the rates, etc., etc. And that's has been just a fundamental limit of variable lending protocols. And so we thought about fixed rate, and then the big question was like, hey, what is the system that allows us to promise liquidity at multiple places at the same time? And this, you have multiple ways we could have approached this, like, RFQ auctions, etc. But really, the very simple thing on top of which you could build more complex pricing systems is just you have liquidity, you make an offer, and you say, I'm happy to. So it's literally like a message that you sign and that you'd broadcast in a mempool. And in this message, you say, hey, I have $1 million. I'm happy to lend it against like BTC, right? And whoever is the borrower that sees that can take it. And so there is no such thing, such market structure that is like, similar or has a name to this already. It's just like a simple data availability layer of some sort where you just like broadcast your intent about what you're ready to lend and borrow and at what price. And when you take all those offers together, they're just a gigantic order book, right? That has many dimensions being like the oracles, like the collateral, etc., etc. And so essentially what you're placing here is limit orders. So those are orders with limit prices, like limit rates, that are on multiple dimensions of the order book. So your offer commits liquidity. Just think of it this way. You have one order book for each lending market, say like Bitcoin to borrow USDC, ETH to borrow USDC. Your offer is a limit order on multiple order books at the same time, right? And this is like a concept that does not exist like currently. Like I do believe we're like sort of like the first to approach lending through this lens. And so yeah, I wouldn't have like a comparable or a name for it. Maybe you should come up with one, by the way.